Good afternoon. Welcome to our ImageOut conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the narrative features in our festival this year, Through the Glass Darkly. I'm Michele Thornton, and in addition to being an ImageOut board member, I'm a professor of health policy at the State University of New York at Oswego. On the screen with me right now is our interpreter, Heather. Heather, thanks so much for being here and helping to make our festival more accessible to an even broader audience. We do have some special guests with us today, and I'll introduce you to them in just a moment. But first, I'd like to set the stage a little bit on this film for any of you who have not yet had the chance to watch it. Allow me to just read a brief description. After Charlie's daughter disappears, another girl from Elrod, Georgia goes missing. Convinced that there is a connection, Charlie draws suspicion and contempt from local law enforcement and townspeople as she stops at nothing to expose its most devastating and darkest secret. So with that, I'd love to get us started and bring in our guests today. Joining us from LA, we have Lauren Fash, the writer and director of the film, and Robyn Lively, the lead actor who plays Charlie.
Hi.
How are you guys doing? Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
I'm so excited to be able to talk with you today about the film. There are just some great twists and turns in this, definitely complex characters, and a little bit of, I think, social commentary threading throughout it. I'm really looking forward to kind of hearing your perspective about all of those pieces. But maybe before we dig into the film, I want to start with you, Lauren. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into filmmaking to start with?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I never really thought about film as a job, as a potential, it wasn't something that I came out of the womb with a camera. But when I was 21, I was living in San Francisco, and I took a class that shot on Super 8 cameras, and it was just an elective class, but I kind of fell in love with the process, and I spent a semester shooting trains in San Francisco and on these little Super 8s, and then just kind of fell into a PA job on a bigger budget film, and just really was kind of blown away by the whole process. So I ended up going to film school at SC and graduated like a decade ago. So yeah, it's been great.
Great. And am I correct? This is one of your first full-length narrative films that you would?
Yeah, it is my first one. My first. Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to come back to that in just a second. But Robyn, how about you? I had a peek back into your very impressive acting career, and I know we've all seen you in wonderful productions, both on television and the big screen. But what got you started in acting?
Oh gosh, I never actually made a decision to be an actress. It's just something that I've done my whole life, and I've been so fortunate to do my whole life. I started when I was 3. So my mom was literally with commercials that I would get, she would draw little pictures by the lines because I couldn't read. So yeah, this is really all I've ever known. And I just can't imagine my life without it. I love it so much.
Great. Thank you. Maybe we can talk a little bit about how the story came to be. Lauren, were there specific inspirations that kind of brought this story to life for you? And maybe why start with this genre, the suspense thriller kind of crime drama? What kind of spoke to you about that piece of it?
Well, my grandmother was diagnosed with dementia in, I think it was 2012. And I graduated recently from film school, and I was looking to do my first feature, and it was one of those things where we started researching the disease, and it was just wild. I couldn't imagine anything more horrifying than essentially losing your mind. And we really kind of started to develop the idea of a character grappling with reality, and just trying to figure out a world in which we got to play with that visually. And so a psychological thriller just seemed like the perfect fit in terms of genre. It's also one of the hardest to execute. So we spent 2.5 years on the script and did 14 drafts. And it started here, and then I can't even tell you, where it started and where it ended were very different. But yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, I have to imagine the filming, the complexities around filming, both kind of the hallucinations, the memories versus the reality of what's happening, and kind of weaving that all together sort of seamlessly. I was really impressed with that piece of it, and even as the viewer, not knowing 100% in which spaces of those you were actually watching at any given time, I think really added to the excitement of it.
Yeah, the visuals. I had an incredible cinematographer. His name's Damian Hahn, and he's just so talented, you know, and we spent a lot of time. That was what we spent the most time doing, was figuring out how we were going to differentiate the worlds without giving too much away, because I'm really drawn to films with unreliable narrators. I think it's so fun to kind of go on a journey with a character who doesn't necessarily know what's real, you know, and what's going on around them, and then you kind of figure it out with them. So that, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of work, but I really do love this project, and you know, I spent 7 years of my life on it, so it's like a, you know, baby.
I want to come back for sure to Charlie and the worlds that she created for herself, but before we get there, can we talk just a little bit about the actual setting, the town that you created of Elrod, Georgia? To me, it felt like it had its own character and role in this film. And certainly, you know, there's evidence of racism and homophobia, all of those sort of like terrible things that we think about. That was coming across really both in the imagery, but the way that the characters talked. Definitely it's a rural setting, and we get some clues about the time frames from the city itself, or the town. But even that part of it is sort of hard to tell. Was Elrod, Georgia based off a real location? And can you maybe talk a little bit about how that led to decision making about where to shoot, and, you know, kind of how it was actually set?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think thematically time was something we really wanted to focus on. And in terms of finding a location for this film, specifically one that felt timeless. And a lot of those small towns, they really do. They feel not a lot changes over the years, and especially visually. And so we shot in a small little town. There were two towns, Jasper, Georgia, and Ellijay, Georgia. And when I was a kid, I used to go there. So when we started writing the script, the lake was the first location that really, I used to go to this lake every summer in Jasper when I was growing up. And so I was just really drawn to the idea of that downtown. So the opening shot of the movie is that kind of boom up, and you see the town. That's Jasper, and that's their kind of main, I think it is Main Street. Yeah, and you know, just the idea of Charlie really getting lost in time, and I'm glad you said that you felt like the town itself was a character. That was certainly intentional. We really wanted that to feel like its own thing. It had its own theme. There is the opening cue as well as the town theme. So I really wanted to set a tone for the world, and give it a kind of a unique feel. And I love those small towns. They're great. There is a lot of homophobia. I mean, you really do go back in time a lot of times when you go there. And for someone, I grew up in Atlanta. I've lived in San Francisco and LA. So for me, I've lived kind of a city life. So it really is interesting to go and see, you know, different sides of things.
The world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Robyn, when you first saw this script and kind of you were introduced to Elrod and then of course Charlie, what were your first impressions?
I absolutely loved it. I tell the story how I got the audition and the character breakdown. I'm reading it. And I was like, oh, this sounds so interesting. And I was like, well, it's set in the South, which I'm from Georgia as well.
Which is so weird.
I know. A small town in Georgia. And I loved the script. I loved the auditions. I thought, you know what? I'm not right for this. I'm just gonna, gonna give it a shot. I'm sure I'm not gonna get it, but and it ended up being one of the best auditions I've had. I don't know what it was, but it was just like I really connected to this character. And the next day I heard from Lauren from Fash. I call her Fash. I heard from Fash, and I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised. I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. I guess this is happening. So,
it's a good story. I mean, her audition it's the best audition I've ever seen. It was unbelievable. It was, yeah, we were in the production office in Atlanta. I was already in pre-production, and she was the last person we cast in the movie, you know, because Charlie is such a unique character. It's not, and it is, you know, it's not something that anybody can just step into. You really have to have a wide range to play this role, and you have to have a bit of an ability to be a chameleon, I think, because Robyn is the exact opposite of Charlie. So the fact that, I mean, it's still kind of, and it might be the same for you after watching her in the movie. You're just like, wait, I'm sorry, you know.
She always says, she's like, if I had known you before, there's no way I would have cast you.
I wouldn't have. That would never work. But yeah, so we were going back and forth, the casting directors, and I was very adamant about Charlie because I feel like I know her. I put a lot of myself in that character, and then, you know, you spend 2.5 years creating / getting to know someone. You know, I was just very particular about who I wanted to go after. So the casting directors puts a couple of actresses on tape here in LA. And so when I started watching the tape, I got it was like 10 p.m. on a Friday night. I got the email, and there were a couple of faces, and I clicked on Robyn, and I started watching this audition, and I was just completely fucking floored. I just started, like, you know, moving in, and I was like, oh my God. And I showed the producers, and everybody was like, what the hell? You know, I was like, we found Charlie.
And honestly, as an actor, like, there's no greater feeling than that, to feel like I need to have been received like that, and to have that confidence, especially doing something that I'm so, it's just not within my nature at all. I've never, ever had the opportunity to play a role like this. So I needed that confidence, and I needed that reassurance that she gave me daily, and everyone, all of the crew and the producers were so wonderful. But I have to also say, when I read the script, you never know when you're going into an independent film what the end product is going to be. Sure. And you hope it's going to be amazing. But when it ends up being, it exceeds even your greatest expectations, it's unbelievable. Because honestly, like, you could get a director who doesn't know what they're doing, or you get a cinematographer who makes you look terrible. And this film, I am so proud of it. And it ended up being 1 million times better than I even had imagined. And that's honestly the truth. So
we had good, a good lead.
It's
nice. Crazy too, not to like continue brag, but there was not a single take I couldn't use with Robyn. I mean, it was like, she just lived and breathed this character, you know, and again, someone who I would yell cut, and, you know, she'd be in character, and then I'd yell cut, and she'd become Robyn. And it was like, okay, so, you know, and I just mean like manner. In general, you know, Charlie is not feminine, and Robyn is, you know. So it was
Robyn is.
It was funny to like see that happening, because we met on set. I mean, you know, we met the day she flew in, which was a week before we started filming. It was a 27-day shoot, so we had a week of rehearsals, and that was kind of our get to know each other time. So it was great.
I want to talk a little bit more about kind of some of the complexities around Charlie's, the character of Charlie. And, you know, of course, like, right away we find out that she's lost her daughter. And of course there's going to be a lot of grief associated with that. But really that's just one of Charlie's struggles, right? We find out as the story unfolds that she has some challenges around alcoholism, maybe pills. There's definitely the dementia, maybe some interpersonal struggles. And I got the sense, at least in some part, that those struggles might be related to some pieces related to her sexuality and her own acceptance of that, as well as kind of living in this environment where there's prejudice around that. Absolutely. How important to you was that part of her identity to the overall story? Did you feel like that was a critical piece of this? Or was, you know, could this story have been the same if Charlie was straight?
It's a good question. I don't think the story could be the same if Charlie was straight. But that being said, her sexuality was just a piece of the puzzle, and it was simply a character choice. It wasn't the focus of the movie. And I think a lot of films, you know, not that they're gay movies, but they really they spend a lot of the story and a lot of the plot points on the sexuality, on, you know, what it's like to be gay, and it's pretty specific. I just wanted to make a psychological thriller with a character who happened to be gay, and then kind of see the ins and outs of how it affected her daily life in this specific, journey. I didn't want to do a movie about a small town gay person, and I didn't want to focus the story around that. I want to see more commercial films where it's just a choice. It's a character choice. It's not the movie. It's just, I think the more we have interesting, unique characters, the better. And I think specifically for the gay community, it'll be fun in the next couple of decades to see what filmmakers do, because I think there's a lot of room to make it more of a commercial thing. You're seeing, is it one of the Marvel characters gay now? I think one of the Marvel, I don't know, I'm really bad with those movies, but you're going to see, I think we're going to see more commercial films. And not to say commercial is a bad thing. I just mean movies that are geared towards broad audiences. Broad audience. Yeah. Like bigger audiences, right? It's just not a niche audience. I didn't want to make a movie that only a select group of people were going to connect to. I wanted everybody to be able to watch this movie and empathize with this character and go on this journey without it feeling like you're being hit over the head with the fact that, she's gay.
Yeah. Robyn, when you realized that you were going to be embodying this character who had some more masculine traits, all of these other kind of complex interwoven identities, did you have to do anything different in terms of preparing, or your process, kind of to get into her mind?
Oh, 100%. Like I decided to cut my hair. That was my decision. I called her and I was like, I want to do my hair darker. I want to cut it. Because for me, it's so important to physically feel like the character, especially when it's a character like this. As soon as I'm in the skin of the person, as in like, she knows the story, but I got my wardrobe immediately so that I could walk around my house and look at myself in the mirror and figure out how would she walk and how does she move. And the minute I put those clothes on and put those boots on and kept my boots untied, all of that, those are like specific character choices that allowed me to really embody her. I couldn't have done it without it. I could not have done that with long hair. It's just like, no, it has to go. So,
and now I can't imagine that kid. At first I was like, I don't know, I was back and forth with it, but
for me, like, and then she was so supportive. She's like, absolutely. At first I was like, I want to do my hair darker. She's like, well, and then she called me back and she said, you know what, if that's what you're feeling, go for it, do it. So she gave me full reins to do whatever I felt necessary. So, yeah.
Visually, and I think her hair plays a big role in kind of how the story unfolds, right? Without giving it too much away, there's a big change there. And it really, I think, adds to changing how the audience perceives Charlie's character and kind of in the different space and time. So I can definitely see how that would change your feeling of portraying her as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, I'm this person. I am her, that's how.
Well, it's funny too, because when we met, she had short hair. Like, obviously I'd seen the audition tape, but when we met, we had short hair. She had short hair, and you look so different now. And it's just so funny because I only knew her, and now she looked kind of like, hi.
Yeah, hi. Yeah. She didn't know it. She didn't know the other me.
Yeah. Right. That's why it was so trippy when she would like turn into Robyn. It's like, whoa.
Thank goodness she didn't know me then.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. I would have like, hell no.
One of my favorite parts was watching Charlie's different reactions to each of the other women in the film. And so I think this is really interesting that you cast Charlie at the end, because I was kind of thinking about how each of those relationships revealed these new parts of Charlie's story. So whether it's kind of that tenderness in the flashbacks with her partner, Angela, or the awkwardness and embarrassment with some of the advances from the women that worked at Rebels, even I really like the kind of vulnerability that she shared with the bartender, Cricket, as well as the flirtation, like light as it was, with the reporter. So can you tell me a little bit then, because at first I was assuming, right, that you kind of, had your Charlie in mind, and then we're kind of pulling those other people, in.
I did have Charlie in mind. I knew exactly who she was. That's why when I saw that tape, I was like, that's her. That's it. There it is. Like, there's no one else who could play this role. I mean, I literally, when I saw her, I was like, we have to have her. I don't care that's it. There's nobody else, and I mean, I had a very, very specific idea of what I wanted. It was better than anything I could have imagined.
Which is
honestly.
so interesting that I read it and I was like, well, I'm not going to get this.
No,
I won't get it,
No.
but you know.
No, it was spot on in terms of my interpretation of who this person was. And Robyn's eyes, she has these wonderful, they're so cinematic, and it really carries a lot of this story. And you're talking specifically about her reactions. It's her face. I mean, it's just the way she embodies it. I'm telling you, I'm just saying, like, my DP and I would talk about it all the time, because lighting was a huge factor in this movie. I wanted to shoot a noir film in color during the day. And so, the lighting is very contrasted. The lighting is very, intense. So that's tricky sometimes when you're working with that. You want your actors to look great, and so there was a lot of discussion about, like,
your actor wants to look great.
Yeah, you always want your actors to look. There's some of these movies I'm like, okay, that's a choice. But
But I didn't want any makeup though. I was
there was no makeup.
Don't do that. Don't put eyeliner. Don't do it. But, of course we had a little bit just because you have to do some, but I was really particular about that.
Yeah, it was easy to get her out of hair and makeup, which was great because she's in every single scene. But yeah, it was definitely something that we kind of, really spent a lot of time on.
Yeah. Robyn, the chemistry that you showed with each of those different characters was so nuanced and different, right? You just saw all these different sides of Charlie. Were there any of those dynamics that were easier or harder to bring to life?
Honestly, this film I've never had an experience like this where everything just worked. Everything just, like, I met her and I was like, I feel like I know you. I feel like I've known you. This is so crazy. And Susan, and oh my gosh, when I met Shanola, you always hope that the person playing opposite you through the entire film is someone that you're going to get along with. She was like lightning in a bottle. From the minute I met her, I was like, I love this person. And because of our chemistry, my chemistry with Shanola, my chemistry with everyone on set, my daughter, Kinsley, we're all still friends today, which is so unusual. Like, Shanola and I will be friends to the end of time. We'll be friends to the end of time. This is just the way it is. But because of that, it translates on film. That kind of chemistry, you can't hide it, you can't suppress it. It's there or it's not.
In fact, one of my main directions to the two of them was, you don't like each other so much, because their chemistry was so strong from the second they met. I was like, all right, you like each other.
Right.
It was really interesting.
I could not have done it without Shanola. I really couldn't have. And then Bethany and I were just like that. I mean, I was like, I've never done scenes like this with a woman. I don't know how this is going to be, but honestly, it was just like, it just fell into place, and it was so natural, and it was so organic, and she was wonderful and such a wonderful actress. And I feel so fortunate, because I feel like the end result of that kind of chemistry off camera really resonates on camera. So
yeah, we had a wonderful cast. It was a really great group of people.
Was Shanola's character, Amy, always written as a woman of color?
Yeah. Because the idea of being a pariah, I came out very young. I came out when I was 17, and in those small towns, especially back then, you do have that feeling of needing to hide yourself and feeling like an outsider, and that was part of their journey. Is these two outsiders come together, in a town that doesn't necessarily accept them or want them around, so yeah, that was very intentional. And
I also think that because we both grew up in small towns and experienced that, like, I wasn't the object of it. I wasn't the subject of that kind of, but I will tell you that I saw it growing up. I didn't really know what it was at the time, but looking back, and I think that's why I could relate so well, because I definitely saw that. I saw so much of that behavior around me, which was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk briefly, pivot a little bit to some of the imagery and symbolism in the film. The name Through the Glass Darkly, correct me if I'm wrong, originally comes from scripture, right? It's quoted in 2 different places in the film. And I'm going to just kind of read how the language goes. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as I am known. Can you tell me more about this passage and why it was meaningful to you in the context of this film?
She's very religious.
I'm super. Not so much. But you know, I mean, I did grow up in the church.
In the Southern
Baptist.
Doesn't everyone grow up in
Southern Baptist
Southern
church?
Baptist? Yeah.
So the scripture itself, to me, you know, I love the idea. Mirrors thematically, you know, we use a lot of reflection shots. We use glass breaking, and the idea is that even a cracked mirror, you know, and that was, to me, it was like Charlie was always looking at a mirror, but it was so cracked she couldn't see her own reflection. She couldn't see the world. She can't process the world around her because she has no idea what time she's in and what space. And so again, like with time and reflection and all of those elements, you know, this just felt right to me. I remember, I don't know how this passage even came about, to be honest, but I read it and I was like, oh man, that's this story, you know. So then we used it as a major kind of plot point, obviously, and the title.
Right. That imagery, I mean, you kind of nailed it in terms of my next question about all of the breaking glass and even the characters' names, right? The last names of the main characters. This idea of seeing and being seen, and then like the changing ways that we see things. That narrative is just so important to kind of how we understand this film. Can you talk a little bit about we started at this place, but this piece about not knowing what the real thing is that you're seeing, and kind of how you're discovering that with the lead character. Can you talk about kind of some of the challenges around producing the film like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, the trickiest part is figuring out how much information you want to give away, especially in a thriller, when everything kind of has to, execution wise, you really have to be careful about how much you give, but you also want to plant what I call like Easter eggs, so that the second time you watch the movie, you're like, oh my God, they did that. Oh shit, that's, you know, and so I think in general, you know, with any story, you're always trying to, you don't want the audience to be ahead of you, and you don't want to give, you know, you also don't want to treat them like they're not able to figure it out themselves. So when you're doing a thriller like this, it's just this fine line of making sure that you're telling the story, you know, thoroughly, but and giving them enough information to keep them on their toes without giving anything away, and also not cheating. You know, I think in a lot of thrillers, you don't want to cheat. You don't want to do something that then it's like, oh, well, that could never happen. You know, so that's really, really difficult, because when you're dealing with a protagonist who doesn't necessarily grasp reality, that, I mean, talk about a mind fuck. I mean, not to be, can I say that? Sorry, I shouldn't.
I think so.
But you know, that's what this movie was. I really did want to kind of, you know, fuck with people's heads a little bit. Yeah. I said it once. I feel like if I said it once, it's like, 3 times now. We'll bleep it later.
We've got a question from one of our audience members that I want to share with you, and I think it kind of builds on this. What kind of, and you've sort of talked about the fact that we know this is a darker theme, and you know, it definitely was a thriller that you were interested in doing. Can you talk about kind of what led you, or what kind of made you gravitate towards that? Are there other, you know, kind of films that you've been inspired about that are in that genre that kind of made you want to have your opening narrative feature debut be in that space?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm just kind of drawn to darker stories, and I'm really drawn to, you know, I this whole character, the main thing that she's trying to grapple with is grief, and I feel like that's something that I can understand, having lost my dad really young. So I've never had kids. I don't know what it's like to lose a child, but I do know what it's like to lose someone, you know, your person, and how that just is a domino effect for the rest of your life. And so a lot of my storytelling does focus around characters who are dealing with grief, and I love psychological thriller. I mean, I just love that genre in general. I love the look of it. I think it's so beautiful. Lighting wise, you know, I love being able to play with style, and I like stylistic films that don't necessarily draw attention to themselves, but you watch them and they feel like their own world.
She was so thorough. She had storyboard photos and pictures and depictions of every single scene and the way she wanted it played out. We had rehearsals before, which is something, and I've been in this industry my entire life. And I was like, wow, rehearsals, and what? I've never had rehearsals. Like, is this what people do?
Yeah.
So
I was like the day after you got there too. I was like, okay, let's go.
Rehearsals. Like, I think like one of the first days too was the video of me. And,
that's right. Yeah, we did
Angela.
The home movie. Yeah, we had to shoot the home movie and
it's like, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Now you guys have you've been a couple for
many
many years, and let's do some video of the two of you. Hey, nice to meet you. All right.
Yeah, it's like shooting a sex scene on day one. It's
totally,
like, okay, go.
Totally. But
throw you right in.
We're saying like, oh my gosh, what did you say like after you saw the footage of that?
It was a picture that I took of the two of them. And I was taking photos for art to put in the house, and so we just did a little photo shoot with Bethany and Robyn, and it was just unbelievable the amount of like love that they were able to portray after meeting each other, 30 minutes before we started shooting. And it was just, it really did. I was kind of like, oh damn, that's awesome. Because I was concerned. I cast 2 straight women,
totally.
And not,
I was a little concerned too, but I actually didn't put much thought into it. I really didn't. I was like, I was in it. So, but like, I guess I've never done that before. I didn't know how that was going to play out, but it just, as actors, you have to be ready to like take on, kissing scenes the first day you meet someone, crazy things like that. You're like, really? You had to schedule that on the first day? Thankfully, her scheduling was really considerate. But anyway, yeah.
I think there's obviously tons of direct character development and it's really, a deep, interesting character that we could really delve deeper into. But I also want to talk just a little bit about some of the broader themes in the film that I think are really notable given the fact that this film is released this year. And there's so much unrest going on that's related to injustices in the legal system and law enforcement. And while most of that conversation focuses around racism and those systemic disparities, I think your film really portrays a very closely related piece of that. And that's talking about kind of how people with power, privilege, wealth, kind of get a pass sometimes and are maybe certainly treated differently than perhaps a character like Charlie, lesbian, maybe lower to middle class woman, certainly. And she was kind of being fast-tracked to be the scapegoat in this case. If there was a small town police chief watching this film or a city council person, right, trying to think through some of the police reforms that their communities are just calling out for and protesting about right now, what messages would you want them to take away about their interactions with the LGBTQ community or just marginalized people in general?
I think, it's so funny that you bring this up because I was thinking back when we were shopping the script, we sent it to, we had a big agent come on and read it. And the first thing he said was, well, this is completely unbelievable. No one would believe a guy would do something like this. And this was before the Me Too movement, because we were doing this back. This was an early draft as well, so it was several years ago. And they just said this character is completely unbelievable.
What?
Yeah. And they were like, no, we don't believe it because of the what happens to the antagonist, which now seems pretty mild with some of the cases that have been uncovered. I was watching that documentary called The Vow about the sex cult. And I was like, well, so, I mean, I think it was interesting that men were reading this going, there's no way. That's just right. Another note that we got was this movie isn't gay enough. There's not enough, there's no gay sex. It's just interesting. I don't know, that just came to my head. But I think in terms of what I want, I'm hoping people to take away, I like having social commentary in my films. I just don't want to preach anything. I want people to watch it and take it for what it is And that's my goal, is for them to go on this journey, and what they take away from it is really up to them. I'm just here to tell a story and take you on a ride, and I'll insert some of my own viewpoints without being too political about it or feeling like I'm hitting anybody over the head, because I don't want to alienate audiences. That's not my job. You know, I think the most effective storytelling are ones where you watch them, and then by the end of it, maybe you're able to empathize with someone that you have never met, a character you've never met or understood. I think that's the power of film in general, is the ability to empathize with people we don't know. And you know, I think that's what storytelling, that's why we have it. Part of the reason we have it, at least.
Yeah. It's a very subtle form of activism, right?
Yeah, totally.
You know, kind of surprise people with it.
We're all here just to change the world. So, you know,
right. You know, this year in general, despite all of the unrest that, you know, like we were talking about there, it has got to feel like a weird time to release a film during the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about just your experiences in terms of promoting the film and getting the word out, and how that's been different than maybe your other experiences? Either one of you can kind of share your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say, the biggest thing. So we're an indie film, so we're doing the festival circuit. Obviously, this is for a festival, and the most unfortunate thing is that we don't get to screen it. You know, I haven't seen this movie with an audience, and before we premiered it, only about 10 people had seen it, and so that's hard, because you know, we did premiere at Frameline, and it was, you know, I lived in San Francisco, so the idea of going to the Castro Theater was just, you know, that's such a fun part of the process. You put all this work into something, and then getting to see people react to it.
You feel so raw.
Yeah, you kind of,
man.
I just love.
It would have been so.
This is also a type of film you need to see in the theater. Like, I spent so much time on that sound design that you're never going to hear on a laptop. No, it's just not. That's not the way this. I think most filmmakers will agree with me. They don't want you watching their stuff on a laptop, but specifically a psychological thriller with a heavy sound design that is subtle, that you're only going to pick up in a theater. Yeah. So that, I think, is the biggest kind of pull in terms of selling it. You know, we're not having in-person screenings, but obviously our sales agent is able to send it out just the same. So it's definitely a new world, but I will say that I think the biggest takeaway is just feeling like we're not getting to interact with an audience at all. You know, and I wish I'd be so interested to hear, you know, people's reaction to her role. You know, I want to hear it. I want to know what people's reactions are. So that's unfortunate. Yeah,
that's been a bummer. And we did it a Q&A, and Shanola was on, and I was in another state. And it was so hard because Shanola and I together.
Oh God.
It's like, it's a comedy act, but it was just so hard because she's, you know, running her mouth and saying things, but then I couldn't really say anything on top of her because you couldn't hear. So it just, you're missing that chemistry, and so this is why we're doing this together as well, because it's so much nicer to be together and do these, the Q&As. Otherwise you miss so much. And Shanola after was like, I'm not going to do that again. I am not doing that. That was terrible. And we all felt that way. Yeah. Maybe it was us too, because we're like, it was just hard. But it is what it is. Yeah. We're making the best of it.
Right.
It's great that you know, the world is kind of, that all these film festivals are still happening though. You know?
Yes, it is.
I'm really appreciative that you guys have, you know, figured out how to make it work.
Definitely.
So that's
It's been a grand experiment, that's for sure.
Yeah, I bet it has.
But definitely also one of the best pieces is, I think, that we've been able to have more in-depth conversations with people like yourself, just because the logistics are a little bit simpler. You know, that we're not trying to fly everyone around. We can work with schedules a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's true.
We only got a couple minutes left, but maybe you guys could tell me what's next on the docket. What are you working on next?
Well, we might have another project.
Yeah,
together.
So I wrote I wrote another film that is being sent out now, but she's in it. I mean, I wrote a part for her, so she better fucking do it. Yeah, so it's a coming of age comedy. So it is the exact opposite of this movie. It literally could not be more different.
Thank goodness.
I don't know why. I just
I
like
like
to make things difficult. I don't know. I guess I like to be out of my comfort zone. This next project certainly will be, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It should be a good
And
time.
I'll have time with this one. I'm like Through the Glass Darkly. I got it, and I was like on the plane. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to learn this entire script. I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time to prepare. Ugh.
I don't know how she did it, because honestly,
So
she was in
challenging.
every single scene.
Well, because you have to think about it. Like if I'm prepared for the first day of work, if I'm not prepared for the next one, when am I going to do it? I won't have any time when that day ends to prep for the next day. So I had to be at least 2 days prepped before.
And we were also, our shooting schedule was crazy. We were
It
doing,
was crazy.
splits and night shoots and that stuff just, it's, and it was also 30 degrees in Georgia.
Yeah.
Shooting. It was cool. It was intense, but it was awesome. It was the best experience of my life, hands down.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us the experience, your perceptions of kind of how things went, and certainly the characters. It was just an unbelievably fun, interesting film to watch, and I am excited to be able to share with our audience more about it. I hope it's going to be screening in the festival here for a few more days, so we hope that people still, if they have not had a chance yet, to go and download the film. If you can watch it on a bigger TV in your house, then just stick it on a little laptop. Thank you so much to Heather for interpreting today, and thank you both to Robyn and Lauren for spending some time with us to talk about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, you too.